Okay, welcome all. Calling the New London Budget Committee meeting of December 3rd to order, and welcome everyone here, and thank you for your participation. Just in terms of agenda review, we had a select board report coming from Rich Anderson. Rich is unable to attend the meeting due to a commitment in Concord. Chris Lorio also will not be in attendance, and Lindsay Lund, both with work conflicts. But I spoke with Rich this morning, and he said there was really nothing of material import to bring to this committee, so we'll take that. Secondly, I wanted to, just in terms of the sequence here, what we'll do is we'll let Sam, we'll have you go through each section of your department and hold our questions for the end versus interrupting you like I would normally do and ask about paving when we get to that line item. We'll do the same with Will, Adam, and certainly Ashley and Lynn. King Solomon, Masonic Lodge, will not be here. We'll add them to our agenda for our next meeting. And Ashley is going to talk us through health services, budget asks, and supporting information. I wanted to also acknowledge receipt from Jay Lyon, Chief Lyon, on some additional information on overtime. That was a question that was raised at his budget presentation. He and I met, and he subsequently put that information in writing, and I will share a copy of that with the committee. And thank you very much.
Sorry for the delay.
No worries, thank you. The Energy Commission came at our last meeting and asked for a capital reserve request that was substantially higher than the original ask. It was $100,000 higher. We asked for additional information, and they are going to meet with the select board at a next select board meeting, which is not tomorrow, my understanding.
Correct. We've canceled tomorrow's meeting. I'm working with Jamie to try to get him on the agenda for the 18th.
Okay. And our thought was, let the select board hear the detail supporting their request, and also to be able to make a determination before rescheduling energy to come back to this committee. We may just simply accept what the select board does or suggests, or if we feel it's necessary, we will ask them to come back. But it seems to me it would be duplicitous, and we can handle it that way. The last agenda item is to talk about our schedule going forward. We're getting close to the end of the process of budget review, but the actual budget development process, I want to talk to the committee about that and how that might proceed over what period of time and in what format, and talk about a different approach than what we have done in prior years. So we'll cover that at the end of the meeting. I don't see public here for public input at this point. Of course, Putnam, you're part of the public, and Will, you're part of the public, and Adam and Jay. So I guess there could be. But lastly, I welcome back Cynthia Roussis, and with our deepest sympathies for your mom's passing.
I'm embarrassed to be mentioned, but I appreciate that.
No, it's part of it, right? All right, Sam, if you are ready to, oh, actually, we can do minutes. So we have a quorum. The November 19th minutes were distributed. There were edits made to that, and there is also one additional edit that Karen found, which is on page 5 of 6, the last item under action, find and distribute warrant article. Find the specific wording for the 2019 warrant article. That should read 2018 warrant article. So that's the amended recommendation of these minutes. And if I have a motion to accept,
I will move to Accept the minutes as amended.
And a second. Meg, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed. Minutes are approved as amended. And Sam, the floor is yours.
All right. Obviously, having many lines in different areas of the budget, I'll try to be brief but detailed as I can. Obviously, it is lengthy at times, so if you do want to interrupt me with a question, I'm okay with it, unless Charlie feels strongly otherwise. So, starting with buildings, which start on page 6 of mine. I'm hoping it's page 6 of yours as well. Buildings is obviously the most affected portion of my budget overall. It's the largest increase just due to multiple things, the biggest driving factor of that being our Frank Anzalone building report. While I think that the building report isn't ideal, I think it was a good working document that we were able to use as a guideline to help us get steer in the right direction to find some of the areas that we are vulnerable and needed attention. And so the budget has reflected a lot of that. I will say that our costs of in-house work compared to his estimated numbers are vastly different. So if you compare them to that report and look at project for project based on my narrative, our projects do tend to come in greatly less. And some of the projects that we've already completed, that I guess you could call our historic data at this point, have proven to be less than what he proposed or recommended. Some of it just being unnecessary. So I think that what I have proposed within the budget and also within the capital reserve request pretty much handles all major items and pertinent safety issues. You know, any safety issue that was red flagged, so to say, in the Frank Anzalone report, we have been addressing or are working on actively addressing in this budget the best we can, and then everything else is going to be handled in the 2027 budget that's before you. And that's kind of the overall statement for buildings that I have. I tried to be as absolutely detailed as I could be in my narratives to explain out projects. There is contracted work within this budget, and it is listed within there what it usually was and how much it costs. Everything else we tried to list as in smaller projects, even if it was in a line that could cover multiple things, like other town buildings or other buildings that has like multiple areas that we covered, like the gazebos and things like that, because there are multiple buildings that don't have their own section of the budget. Other than that, all the other ones like the Academy Building, Whipple, Fire Department are handled within there. Obviously, the Highway Department does not cover any building renovations or additions or anything like that. Those would all be capital requests. And the other thing that I think is important is that like the fire station and Bucher, if you look at Frank Anzalone's report, he has some pretty major things noted in there. But as I spoke at a couple selectmen's meetings and maybe when we did our budget jamboree, like this building Bucher has single phase power that then gets inverted to 3-phase power, and that's technically what the building needs. So it really should have an electrical upgrade. But if the police station is to move in 2 to 3 years or whatever it is, or dispatches to not exist here, or in general, whatever that may be, it wouldn't make sense to upgrade the building to 3-phase. So we've chosen to like put those projects off because it just doesn't make financial sense to invest $150,000 in an electrical service upgrade, which then may be unnecessary in a few years. Same with the fire department. He does list some things like an electrical service upgrade, some major heating things like that. What you see in the budget is recommendations of preserving the building's structure and then figuring out what our next steps forward are. So if there is to be a fire station expansion, that's when we should be handling major upgrades of the building, like an electrical service upgrade or things like that. And so we just tried to take a more real world approach to it. You know, my job as being in charge of facilities isn't to dictate what direction we go with these buildings in the sense of an addition on the fire station or not using Bucher for a police station, but is to preserve the building in the best way we can. And so that's what you see in this budget. And I think other changes in it obviously is utilities like water, sewer, that Lynn obviously, she does the estimating on that along with the cleaning services. Other than that, that is what I would call the general government buildings portion of the budget. Like I said, we could get into line by line if we'd like, and I'm happy to kind of take questions at the end of each section, Charlie, if you want to do that, just because it is kind of long.
This is a good to stop and see if there are any questions related to
Yeah.
buildings.
Yeah.
Lou?
Just want, as you're looking at the upgrading of the buildings, are all the public buildings equipped with fire suppression?
All the public, yeah, correct, yep. All public buildings are.
Good.
I had to look to the fire chief for that answer correctly.
Other questions?
Yep. They all meet code requirement for fire suppression.
Other questions? I have one.
Yeah, hit me.
So we are making, as my words may, I want to be accurate in reflecting it, so we're making a pretty significant investment, and I'd say prudent investment. And when you total out the incremental dollars being assigned to that maintenance, repair expense line, will we in subsequent years see level funding or lower funding because we won't now need in those subsequent years to do the same level of investment?
Absolutely.
And have you sized any of that at this point, or is there any?
I haven't.
It's kind of an unfair question, but
No, well, I think it's perfectly fair. I think, like, perfect examples, I think, would be in here, like the Elkins Beach and Buckland Beach. Those have pretty big dollar amounts attached to them for what they are. And then next year, you're probably going to see $2,000
Right.
because we're going to go back to this kind of like maintaining phase, right? And so I think that all these buildings have some level of that. The Academy Building, Whipple Hall, those have kind of like historic data that we always in our actuals are spending far more than we were budgeting for, and now we're budgeting correctly. But I think what you will see is that once we kind of have this initial burst investment, like you're saying, yeah, it will drop off just like your house does. And then, you know, in 5 years, we may say, okay, now it's time to do this part of this project. And so I think that that will happen where you'll see it either level fund or drop off. And then maybe after, you know, a small period, 5, 7 years, you might see a blip on certain buildings as things become needed. But
it also sounds like we, the collective, we deferred a lot. And we're paying the price for the deferment now
yep.
with the hope we don't repeat the same mistake or short-sightedness going forward.
Yep, and I think what the Frank Anselon report did, at least for me, is created like a roadmap for me to use, but also it brought to attention that you have to look at all these buildings more detailed, right? Like this obviously started before me, but I think it just showed that collectively we were not looking at these buildings as closely as we should have and looking at them in like projects or areas, you know, and we were just kind of broadly looking and go, you know, it was a drive-by assessment. That looks good. And then when you really look at Buckland, it needs quite a bit of siding and it needs a couple new doors and it needs a handrail on the back walkway. But really those are things that should have been done and just kind of, you know, weren't caught, so.
Well, and a lot of it is being handled now in-house versus contracted projects, which generally may be more efficient, but not necessarily more cost-effective.
Yep.
And so as the projects are done in this coming fiscal year that we're investing in, does the capacity that you're using from a labor standpoint then be able to be reallocated to other projects that might not necessarily hit the, hit the radar? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I guess I'm glad you kind of bring this up. Right now, we only have one facilities worker, and obviously, we went over all these lines and said, you know, can we accomplish these? And he said, yeah, with some help. And so this summer, you're going to see Matt, our facilities worker, having like 1 or 2 people from Public Works. And so my foreman and I sat down and said, okay, what is the reduction in Public Works as highway work going to be to make sure that we can accomplish this, because this is clearly the priority, you know? And so that's a balancing act that we do every year. Like when a protective association reaches out to us and says, hey, you can do all this work for free, you know, but it's yeah, it's free, but it's time. And so, you know, in 2027's budget, what you're going to see is that we won't be doing as much of that kind of work probably, because we're going to be focusing on doing what we need to do as far as highway, transfer station, and facilities, and really putting a little bit more effort towards our facilities as far as resources of personnel and stuff like that. I think as far as like subsequent years after that, you're always going to see that Matt is probably, or whoever is in that position of facilities worker is going to be at the red line most of the time.
Adequately, sufficiently employed.
Yeah, yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a couple of questions. This is an area that's near and dear to me. Sam, how many structures do we have, or how would you characterize that for the town?
31, 30.
So 31 structures, of which this would be one. And then, of course, there are roads, and there are, what are we missing when we say there are 31 structures? Just wanting to frame this out for people, because I think this is a place where we fall short as a town and a school district most often. And so I want to kind of get a scope of the scale that we're talking about. And I don't think 31 structures quite captures that. So like, can you talk a little bit more about what that includes?
Yeah, so 31 structures is like everything right down to a well house that we own on Hall Farm Road. So it is like right down to the nitty gritty, but it does leave off small like sheds, like the kayak sheds at the beaches and things like that are kind of like a disposable structure. But like this building is kind of lumped into one, even though we classify as two, right? So we kind of have Whipple Hall and then Bucher. And so it is broken out, excuse me, in this report that this is Whipple, that's Bucher, to try to help that. And then that adds like a number to the buildings, I guess, if that's kind of what you're asking. So
No, in general,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we have to frame this in, I think we have to frame this in a way for the citizens in order for them to figure out how to handle this in decent size increments with which this is. And so, Lynn, a question that I would have of you is, have we got an assessed value of all of these of all of these structures, and like have we got a ballpark value of that? Because I'm trying to walk us through this in the way a business would look at depreciation and look at how we should be managing our buildings. And so the hair on the back of my neck stood up, Charlie, when you said that will this go down? And the answer is it shouldn't. We need to be taking care of the buildings. If it goes down, we're going to get ourselves right back to where we are right now. We have to figure out how to eat the elephant one bite at a time, and we need to take a bite out of it every year. And that's how you end up being able to afford it, because you end up being able to sorry, I'm pontificating. You end up being able to spread that cost out over many, many years instead of coming to us and saying, oh, we've got $90 million worth of repairs we need to do. And the answer is, of course we can't afford $90 million worth of repairs. We got to figure out how to get that into smaller increments that we can manage on an annual basis. And therein lies the discussion. What is that amount that we can afford on an annual basis going forward? And so I guess I kind of took the steam out of Lynn's response, but I think one of the pieces of information that we need is, how much are our buildings worth? What are we actually trying to What are we trying to cover in the long term? This goes back to Lou's question in almost every meeting. When are we going to have a long-term comprehensive strategic plan? Because this is the sort of thing that needs to go in there. And I'm done with my grandstanding for now, but I'll be back at a later date.
Did you want an answer to
Yeah, I
your
would love that, Lynn.
Within the audit, there is a value placed on our assets in our buildings, and then I have a very rudimentary old program that actually lists them out. We also have, within Primex, we have all of our assets listed there too with a value. So I can get that number for you.
Yeah, I'd be interested, because like in a balance sheet, so for example, when YMCA Camp Coniston, which I run in full disclosure, was purchased in 1964, the value of that property at that time is what gets carried on the balance sheet. And so that, even though we know that it costs way more than it did then, that's what that shows. So some of the questions that I would ask is, how current, how accurate are they? Are we up to the 80% of assessed value? Because those sorts of numbers would inform the amount of money that we should be putting in on a regular basis, which I'm not pretending that I know the answer to that. I'm simply stating we have to figure out how to do this together, not a...
Okay, I will get that for you. You're welcome.
Here comes Adam.
Planner, but I probably work with the assessments the most in this room. And that's one thing I would just caution on, that working on the housing crisis and our assessments constantly, there's a big discrepancy between our assessed building values right now and actual replacement cost. And so I think maybe the insurance policies are what would have the replacement costs, because there's a significant disconnect right now. So though the assessed values may show one thing, being able to actually rebuild one of our structures for that amount, virtually impossible.
Thank you.
I think the other thing too, John, that is important is I think we're not in as catastrophic of a position as the school districts are. We haven't allowed our structures to get to that point because Newland inevitably has a high standard of their buildings, and there is, like, most of them are public buildings that people are constantly in and out of. And so while this is kind of like a big bubble of cost in maintenance of these buildings, in the grand scheme, it really isn't that big because we haven't gotten to that point. So like if we were to push off the $200,000 on the roof of this building, yeah, the guy that came and looked at it, the company, said, you're going to start having interior failure relatively soon, even though you just put $1 million into the interior. I hope we're not going to push off that $200,000 because I don't want to have to sit here and beg for it, because we all know the building needs it. And so I think that's the thing, is we've been willing to invest over time, even if it is a little reactionary. Like the clock was kind of reactionary, but we had the money and we knew it needed to be done, so we did it. Same with when we've done other work to structures in general, like the fire station or the police station. We've never really let it fall behind. We've kind of found where we can use that money, applied it, and not allowed the building to continue to fall into disrepair. So I think we are in a better position than a lot of other communities in general.
Thanks. That's where I want to be, and that's where I would like to stay, because sudden hits to the bottom line is a sudden hit to all of the taxpayers' bottom line.
Absolutely.
And it's way easier to space this payment out than it is to have a one-time.
Yep. And that's exactly what we tried to do, where we tried to balance things between capital and in budget, and, kind of bite things off in a, like, can we get one more year out of the carpet in Whipple so that this budget isn't as drastic? Yep, so that's what we're going to do, right? Or in the academy building. So let's wait till next year and do the rug next year, and things like that. So just kind of like, what's priority, what's mandatory, and then what can we kind of live with for a little bit that's more aesthetics but isn't going to break the bank when we do have to do it. So the report does a decent job of helping with that too. So, yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Questions are always good. Keeps us all honest, right? So. All right. Anything else in facilities? Okay. All right. After that, mine goes to Highway Administration, page 12. Is that correct? Okay. Not a huge change here at all, honestly. I mean, you're seeing an increase of, what is it here? 4.6, which is kind of what I would call just our cost of living. There is really no surprises or majorly different things. Uniforms and safety equipment stayed the same as last year, which I think will continue to stay the same. I did decide to zero our CDL training just to kind of help offset the increase that I was seeing in general. I feel that we have a full staff of CDL trained employees, and otherwise we're just carrying $8,000 on a what if. And so my thought is, even if we were to lose an employee right now and a new one was to come on without a CDL, we would want to kind of vest that employee for a year to make sure that they were but making sure that we were going to retain them before we invested $8,000 to $10,000 into a CDL course for them to take to have their CDL license. So I think overall this is pretty modest, and there is no major increases or decreases within the highway administration.
Questions from the committee? Karen?
Thanks, Sam. On part-time wages, we're, if I'm looking at highway administration, it was 0 last year, and this year looking for 9,600?
Yeah, good catch. Actually, this was Lynn's idea, and I really have liked the idea. So when if someone came from the transfer station or from wastewater and worked in the highway department, we didn't track their hours. And so it was like, well, they're working for Public Works, so what does it matter? Well, when I started, I said, I would really like to start knowing, like, how many times and how much money are we putting towards highway workers that are actually the transfer station attendant or our wastewater worker? Because I think it's difficult for me to have drivers in data that says, hey, I'm getting to a point where I need another employee. Like, police and fire can be kind of call-driven and data-driven. I really struggle with that because I don't really have that. So my way was to try to manage where are these people working and where are they doing their time. And so we started coding them differently and charging into that, but it still kind of gets lost in the budget because it's just going into full-time wages still. So Lynn said, why don't we start putting into part-time wages so then we'll better know what that's actually costing us and where it's coming from. So it's not that we're hiring part-time workers, it's just they're coming from another department and we're just tracking it better.
No, that makes a lot of sense to do that. And the other thing that is interesting, showing as no change, is New Hampshire retirement.
That would be a question for
That's
Lynn.
maybe a question for Lynn.
That could be due to the retirement of more senior staff.
If I'm reading it correctly.
Do, 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 do.
Do you want the bigger paper?
No, I don't want the bigger paper, you wise ass.
It's, was like 102 the previous year in '26.
Yep, so
102 again.
that is because we've had somebody retire, other people came in at lower wages,
lower,
so
got it.
that kind of, it does look like we just moved it over, but it is a,
Dynamic thing.
It's a-
No,
yes.
I get it, but I
Yep.
thought it was. Thank you.
Excuse me. So, other questions on highway administration? Okay, all right. Highway, streets, kind of similar here. My new foreman helped me do parts of this budget. We worked on ways to try to keep this more level. Two of those are, it's an off year, I believe, hang on, let me just make sure I'm going to say this right. Yep, it's an off year for calcium chloride, and you'll see it's an off year, quote unquote, for street paint. And so we try to buy those in bulk. Calcium chloride in like a tractor trailer load. That tractor trailer load lasts us 2 years. We talked about this last year. And so the 2027 budget is like an off year. We should have left over that we won't need to purchase it. The street paint is a new thing. We're seeing that the line painting that we have a company come in and do, like the yellow lines in the center of the roads, is lasting a lot longer. And so what happens is if you keep overpainting it, it actually peels up easier because the paint gets thicker on the road. And then when we plow it, it scrapes it up. So to help reduce the budget, we decided we're going to try letting our line painting go 2 years. And so it'll be, one budget cycle, you'll get a break. So you happen to get a break in calcium chloride and street paint. Next year, you'll end up seeing a small spike there from calcium chloride and street paint, but hopefully we can find somewhere else that we might be able to trade some work, because that goes back to our initial conversation in facilities where we have to figure out what we can put resources towards, right? We're a limited crew in size, and so we can only do so much prep to paint a road, put calcium chloride out on dirt roads, do crack sealing on other paved roads, prep roads for pavement, all those things. And so we have to decide what is the priority this year, what's the project, and how are we going to fund that, right? And so I think as we kind of go on and adapt as Public Works, you're going to see that happen more, where one year you might see a larger increase in paving, and then you're going to see a decrease in a lot of other services, because we can only do so much to prepare for that. And where in the past, I think that we've kind of always done a little bit of everything, I don't think that's the best way to tackle it, especially in Public Works, because like paving services, you can save so much by doing more. The more you do, the cheaper the tonnage gets and the cheaper the work gets, because it's less moving and all those things. So if we could tackle doing 10% more there, but reducing the rest of the budget by 10%, because we're just not going to do as much work in those other areas, you'll get a better product overall. So that's what we were trying to do in this budget. Other than that, you'll just see your standard increases in sand, salt, which, those are contracted services that we try to shop around the best we can. Salt and sand are kind of, feels like we're in a chokehold sometimes because they're very limited, and it's just expensive no matter where we do it from. And other than that, I think that's pretty much it. So, excuse me. Any questions there? If it's paving, Charlie, you used.
It's a totally operational question, Sam, so apologies.
No?
Is there a way to split out, sorry. It's a totally operational question, sorry to do that. If there's a, is there a way to split it out to where we could have calcium chloride one year and then painting the next? So even if we, so that we're not doubling up and you get it spread back out and we're kind of doing that alternate thing, or is that just not?
We talked about it. We're a little bit off this year in general. So what I'd rather do is say next year we're just going to put out less calcium, so then we can get onto your cycle. Because that's what I'd like to do, is have it calcium one year, paint the other. So that's what I'm ultimately hoping to do. And I really won't be able to tell you the answer to that till the end of next summer. But yep, but hopefully we can. Because I mean, between the two of those, you're talking $25,000, which is not insignificant at all. So if we could have it so, you only have 12.5 in each, that'd be great. So we will shoot for that for sure.
Question regarding culverts, that's,
Yep. Oh, yeah. So culverts, that's a great one. We zeroed that one last year because we had kind of a surplus of culverts. We had a lot of culverts fail that were relatively new, and I say new within the last 5 years. And we've kind of decided that they were failing because we always kept this like bulk of culverts, and it was kind of like this, well, just in case. Well, yeah, there's always going to be a storm that could wash out culverts. We try to keep a few on hand, so in case of emergency, but we used to always have 20 or 30, and they're plastic. And so we think what was happening was actually the UV was damaging them, and that's what was causing them to fail. So we used up the stock of good culverts, and so now we kind of have like an emergency stock left. And last year's budget was zero. This year's budget, I had to add them back in, and that's why you're seeing that go back up again. So that's another one, though, that next year when it comes time to do budget, if we have a lot of projects based around paving, you might see that less, you might see that more, depending on what road it is and where and what we're trying to accomplish. So same thing.
thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Honor. Boy, you guys are easy. All right. Transfer station. Well, I guess there's street lighting, which is under my budget. Lynn just throws a number in there for me and does that work. I don't think she's throwing the number. She does do the math. But it's pretty straightforward. Transfer station is the next one. The 14. Sorry about that. All right, so transfer station, this part-time employee, we do have a part-time employee in transfer, so this one is a little bit different, but we still put coding, so when a highway worker comes over to there, we can kind of look within that line to see what the detail is. Everything pretty much stayed the same, other than waste disposal is a 10% increase, and sometimes we say, well, it's a 10% increase on a $200 line, it's not really that much. This is a substantial increase, or what I would call a substantial increase, because they implemented a law that is a $3.50 per ton surcharge on all refuse at the landfill. And so the whole point of that was that municipalities could get that back at the end, but everybody else, like private trash companies, can't get that back. And eventually the state, it was state obviously required, they're going to try to use that to make grants and give back to recycling and solid waste management and things like that. But I have to budget for it because when we get that refund, we can't put it back to the line. It will go back to the general fund. It's just how it's going to go. They haven't even decided exactly how we're going to get that refund and how we're going to apply for it. So we are working with the state and with Mount Carberry, the landfill, to decide how that's going to happen. But that's probably my largest increase in here. Trash hauling fee you'll actually see go down. We did an intermunicipal agreement with Meredith, which has been great because it has added very good consistency. We did not have that before. We had 3 or 4 private contractors in the last 3 or 4 years, and it was just sporadic. They couldn't get help. Their trucks were breaking down. They were going up and down on our prices all the time, and it was just a pain. And Meredith, we've always partnered with Meredith because they're kind of the halfway point for us to the landfill, and use them as kind of a landing zone. And then they were having companies haul their trash as well. Usually the same company. We tried to use like a group buying agreement to try to get that number lower. Mike Fowler, the public works director there, finally got sick of it and said, we're going to start doing this ourselves, because he went over the threshold that he had to say, I can get trash hauled for this much and be saving money. Well, he finally went above that and said, I can actually do it cheaper myself. And if New London buys in, I'll do it cheaper for you, you guys will save money, and then it helps actually create me some revenue. And it's a more solid agreement where they'll help us, we can help them because we have a tractor. And so far, it's been working flawlessly and saved us money, so. Please, yeah.
I just want to mention that for the revenue we're going to get back, it is in the revenue sheet. We did up that by a couple $1,000s to make up for it, so it does offset.
Thank you. Other than that, I think everything probably is within the area that it should be. So, questions?
I have two, and I'm looking to cross-foot my notes. A small one, hydrants, which is back in
Yep.
wherever, when I couldn't foot.
The hydrant services, is that what you're talking about?
$33,250. Does the water precinct have any skin in that game?
I think they're all the skin in that game, essentially.
But,
Yeah, they do all of it. That we're basically paying them for a
oh, that's
service.
paid to the precinct.
Correct.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
They're providing us a service of providing hydrants that are accessible, working order, shoveled, all those
I
things.
think we ought to go renegotiate the. Okay.
You can fight
helps.
that.
That helps. The other question I have is in regard to the trailer units where you're housing your staff and offices.
Yep.
That represents an expense of $28,800 annually to us. Did our insurance company or policy cover any expense associated with the loss of the building?
I don't
So
believe so.
if, for example, I had a plumbing issue in my house and my house got flooded and I had to vacate it and go to temporary housing, my insurance policy covers me for that. Does our town policy cover for displacement due to the loss of an asset?
I'm not getting anything back from them at the moment, but I don't know if Kim looked into that, but I'll re-look into it and see if that question was asked.
That might be a retroactive claim if it
Right.
wasn't claimed. And then a claim going forward for the period of time those temporary provisions are made.
Yeah, I do believe Kim looked into that because I think she notified them that the building was like, we're not inhabiting it anymore, things
Yeah.
like that. And so I think that conversation was had, but I could be
Probably
wrong.
the
So
devil in the detail on something
Yep.
like that, because
Yep.
it's probably the last thing one's thinking about when the building gets condemned, but
Well,
Yeah.
it's also, I think it would probably be more akin to business interruption insurance as opposed to like a homeowner's plan. And man, the exclusions on a business interruption right now are, they don't cover anything. It's just crazy. And just as an industry. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse in the past 5 years.
We should probably.
But
look in-
you should ask 100%.
Yeah, and we should do that sooner than rather than later. One conversation that Sam and I had early this morning was just around the state of that building and how we might need to take it down this winter with the weight of the snow. It might come down on its own, and we don't want that to happen. But we should look into the insurance piece before we make any decisions on taking it down.
I know they were notified about like the potential of us tearing it down and
Yeah.
things like that, but yep, needs to definitely
Okay.
be researched. Great.
the last question I have, Sam, is in relation, it's a broader question. In the 20-question unit document that you prepared for us, one of the things we looked at is asset replacement criteria, and you responded to that. And I'm just, maybe just give us a little, as John would say, color on how you think about, or maybe we should be thinking about asset replacement. Jay and I have talked, Chief Cobb and I have talked about that in regard to the equipment assets and fire and how those criteria are set and established and how they're sort of monitored as you go along to say, do we actually need to replace it based on its current condition? But
Yep.
what's your thinking around that as we look particularly into significant capital expenditures that we're going to be having?
Yep. As far as like equipment, vehicles, things like that, again, kind of goes back to my original thing of police and fire kind of have data behind them and like NFPA and things that kind of guide them in a direction. We don't really have that. So we really try to look at what is the vehicle costing us, just like you would for a vehicle at home. Like, is this, costing me more than it's worth, or the payment of what it would cost to replace it? And then also, what is the job it's doing? And then what is the newest thing for me is kind of like, what is it to rent this piece of equipment for how much we're using it? I think Public Works in the early 2000s gotten this point where it was like we had to own everything ourselves and not really use outside resources, not try to do like a tri-town sweeper or a grader, things like that. And so like last year when we chose not to purchase our roadside mower and things, it was because the amount that we used it was far less than the value of owning it and all that, so we started renting it, and at a greatly reduced rate, even over a 25-year projection. And we do the same thing with everything. There's certain things that we can't do it with, like, plow trucks. And so then it's how do we decide when it's time for those to go? And we kind of use an industry standard. Like, it seems to be 8 to 10 years. We do 12 just because we have a facility where we can wash them and maintain them, do all the maintenance ourselves for the most part on them. And we're lucky that they get stored inside as well. And then some of those things end up getting pushed out. So we never really strictly follow what an industry standard is. Like a grader in a lot of towns, people are going to tell you, we keep a grader 15 years, end of story. We think it's not worth it after that. Our grader's an 89. And it's still, I say this probably sound like a broken record, I say it a lot, it's still the cheapest piece of equipment for us to maintain. And it just is a tried and true piece of equipment that doesn't cause us a lot of problems. So I would say it's handled on a case-by-case basis and on a maintenance cost value. Like how much are these plow trucks cost us? We have one plow truck in our rotation right now that's 15 years old. That was supposed to be replaced when it's 12. Part of that was due to still a COVID backup of getting trucks in and part availability, but also we were able to kind of say, all right, let's wait a little bit longer. And here we are now. And so we're expecting the new truck shortly. But again, that got us 2 extra years where we were able to save that money. Same with the grader. My ideal situation would be to not replace the grader, because for 4 miles of road, your return on investment is not good. And I'm not a big return on investment guy, as you know, but when it comes to the grader, that one's pretty simple. And so we've been really trying to look at that with all of our pieces of equipment. As far as buildings go, calling those assets or capital, that it's a little bit trickier because it's kind of like, again, I feel like I don't have a lot of data to drive it. It's more like, the plow trucks are getting bigger and they're not really fitting well anymore. It's time for a new building. We were getting to that point with the building that's structurally unsound that we're just talking about tearing down, where, we couldn't do an oil change in the wintertime without taking plow equipment off because the trucks are too big for the building. So when we got asked, well, could you fix that building? Anything can be fixed for a certain amount, but what is the usability of the building? And so we put $1 million into trying to fix that building structurally, but yet it's still not fitting our need because a plow truck doesn't fit in it. The smallest truck we have when it was in it, we still had to step up over a plow just to get by it because trucks have gotten bigger. And so it's a little hard to say as far as buildings go and capital, like transfer station, sometimes I lose sleep over, well, what point do we have to say, okay, that transfer station isn't fitting our needs of this town, based not on numbers that I'm proving to you, but based on community feedback, safety, and age of the complex in general. So I wish there was a very cut and dry answer, but that's kind of the best I can give you, and hopefully that's a little more color to the picture.
It is.
Sam, I recall in our meeting, when you were preparing all this, there was a piece of equipment that you retired for that very reason. It was just, you were
Yep,
looking
the
for-
roadside mower. Yep, that was it.
Maybe, I thought you should share that because it's an example of how you're always
Yeah.
trying to find ways to save money.
Yep, the roadside mower was a 2006 New Holland tractor that was about $200,000 to replace, $175,000 at the bare minimum. And we just got to a point where it was really sitting a lot, costing us a lot of money. Every time we used it, it was expensive, and it was very inefficient at doing a job because it was this in-between of, it wasn't quite the right piece of equipment for the job, but it could get it done, so to say. And it was like, well, getting it done, but taking 6 weeks to roadside mowing means I lose a person in Public Works for 6 weeks. Whereas if we rent a machine for $3,000 a week, I might be able to do it in 4 weeks. That's what we figured it was going to be, was about 4 weeks. Well, it turns out we did it in 2. So for $6,000 a year, we did what a piece of machine was going to cost us $175,000 to $200,000 a year. So we just chose to sell the piece of equipment, not have it. It's less space we have to store, less things we have to maintain, insurance is less, all those things. And then we don't have to deal with the headache of maintaining it, right? When it blew a hydraulic line, we called the rental company, they came and replaced it, didn't cost us a penny. So that was kind of the mindset behind it, and we're trying to look at that whenever a piece of equipment kind of comes up. I would like to think if the grader were to catastrophically fail tomorrow, couldn't be repaired, most likely we would just go to either a rental grader, or there are actually companies that come out and grade your roads, you know, however often you'd like, quarterly, whatever it is, and for a set dollar amount. And that return on investment would probably be substantially better, right, than purchasing a $750,000 grader. So, yep. Thanks.
Other questions for Sam? Otherwise, I do not have any. We thank you for your time and your
Yeah.
commitment and the information. It was really well presented.
Thank. Do you want to cover sewer? Yeah,
Sewer.
wastewater.
My favorite
Not
topic.
yeah, not super exciting, but
Forgot that, sorry.
the other thing too that I think just it's kind of gets buried in transfer station that I'd just love to touch on real quick is solid waste cleanup, special waste drives. That goes towards your like triannual hazardous waste day, but also we put in the laws changed on recycling used motor oil. And so you'll see like a relatively large spike there. And whereas that one used to kind of be like 5,000, and then all of a sudden you'd have a 20,000. That was the year we hosted our hazardous waste day. And so you'd see this peak because we were the host town. But now you kind of see this $21,000 in there, even though this past year was a hazardous waste day for us. It's because we have to now, what was happening before is we took waste oil in, it went in a barrel, and then like a local contractor would take it and heat his shop with it as recycled oil. Well, the state has said you can't legally do that anymore because they want to guarantee it's handled correctly. And so, you know, that contractor could essentially take it and just be dumping it on the sides of the road, and New London would get named in that, and we don't want that, right? And so we have to basically take the oil, put it in a container, and then have like Clean Harbors or another company come pick it up, and that costs us in a per gallon amount. If the oil is clean, it's like $1.15 a gallon, which is great. If it's contaminated, 1 gallon contaminating our 275-gallon drum, it's $5.65 a gallon. And so it's going to change the process because it used to be you just dropped it off at Public Works. Now you'll actually have to bring it to the transfer station, give it to an attendant. Attendant will make you wait. They'll dump it into a bucket to ensure that it's not contaminated. If it's not, then you're all set to go. If it is contaminated, we'll actually give the oil back to you, recontainer it, and then you'll have to wait till a hazardous waste day. Because our thing is, if we don't want to get 1 gallon of contaminated oil in the drum, that then contaminates the whole load. So, but there is a cost associated with that, whereas before, we were taking as much oil as people were giving us, and it didn't cost you anything, and now it's just going to cost us annually.
On the hazardous waste days, we pick up a portion of that expense, as does Lebanon,
Yep.
Sunapee.
Yeah, and I said try, but it's really not. It's just every 3 years we host it, but it's actually, Adam would probably know better, but it's like 10 towns that is in the, there you go, 27.
So when you're the host, it's in our budget.
You just cover what comes in, from your residents. They try to, but multiple people.
But as a resident of New London, I can take my hazardous waste to Lebanon when they have their hazardous waste
Correct.
day.
Yep.
And that expense is borne by Lebanon in that case.
Yep, but we're sharing some of that cost.
That's what I was wondering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Having worked those for 10 years at the Planning Commission, the person that meets you at the gate, they ask what town you're from. As long as you're a participating town, that's reported back. And then at the end of the contract amount for the Planning Commission, each town is billed specifically on the proration of their residents participating. So the City of Lebanon doesn't owe anything just because you attended their event. So any participating community can go to any of the events over the 27-town region. We host every third year on a rotation with the other Lake Sunapee towns.
Understood.
So that number that you see, like usually that 4,500, 5,000 is based on an estimate of what we've always been kind of billed. That's why you were seeing that number. John, you had a question, I think, about the oil recycling.
I'm sort of curious, what constitutes bad oil, contaminated oil?
Like water or coolant, and coolant's the number one because it's glycol and things like that. Yep. Yeah, no, good question. Yeah. All right, and then we can go on to wastewater if there's no questions that I produced, sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Skipped right by it. Actually, you lied, it's not 21 on mine. It's 22 on mine. I think overall sewer did go up, just due to our percentage to Sunapee, which is still a fight no matter how you look at it, because we're always arguing what the percentage actually is. This budget year that we're in, 26, was the biggest decrease and the lowest percentage I think we've paid in history to Sunapee. We were slightly up, excuse me, sorry. We were slightly up this year, which is disappointing, but just kind of how our negotiations go. Overall, though, if you were to take that out, sewer is still down overall because we only have one employee there now. And also we reworked how we look at equipment maintenance, things like that. The town has also been proactive, just like with our buildings, like I was talking about, getting more efficient pumps and keeping up and not just being reactionary. Coming from wastewater, I feel that was somewhere where we used to just be very reactionary. We'd wait for a pump to catastrophically fail, and then you know what happens when you wait, you pay a catastrophic price. And so with kind of having a better CIP plan, and we actually have asset management on wastewater that helps us plan out these things. So this year we replaced a 130 horsepower pump with a 103 horsepower pump, and it outdoes the other pump, and it's 30% more efficient. So we save on an electric bill. It was replaced before it was catastrophic, so we didn't have to pay that emergency fee, and it's saving us money over and over. So, and that's pretty much the changes in wastewater. Other than that, not a whole lot changed there.
Sam, when you look at budget versus actual, like in 2024, budget was 540, actual came in at like 417.
Stand by 1 second. Sorry.
And, yeah, this is on the sewer collection.
Could you just restate that, sorry.
Page 22,
Yep.
last line, if I'm reading it right, the budget seemed to be quite a bit higher than actual. And I'm looking at 2024, where the budget was 540 and actual came in at 417. And then 2025, budget was 568, actual 453. Is there something going on with regards to?
Sometimes that number that we're putting on for Sunapee, like our flows to Sunapee, is an estimated number, so it might not be accurate based on the time of budget, and then that's what ends up having to stay. The other thing is we do always budget for catastrophes because we have to. So that could be a sewer overflow or a pump replacement emergency. So we budget for it, and then that money, if we don't spend it, obviously just goes right back to the sewer general fund, I guess you could call it. Yep, the sewer fund. And so it's not really wasted money, but we are just budgeting for that said emergency. Because a pump, like an average pump for us, is $75,000 to $100,000. So that could be, we planned for it to have a problem, it didn't, and then that's why it is the way it is.
I think the other cost, when the pump does fail, that wastewater then has to be hauled out by truck. So we have to hire in a company to actually get the wastewater out in some other way. So those costs can be quite astronomical.
So potentially then if it's,
Oh, you're looking at the actual payment to Sunapee.
right, payments to Sunapee,
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, like, they're estimated, like, we're projecting what we think we're gonna actually do, and then we're basing it on last year's flow total. So if that changes, like, if we do a lot of repair work, that then we don't have, like, we cut down on flow numbers, or we have a dry year where we don't send as much I&I, that payment is less, correct?
so it'll be interesting then to see what flushes out, pardon the pun here, for 26.
No, that's correct. And
Yeah.
it's also, Sunapee, just like us, we always want to say we sent less than we actually did, and Sunapee always wants to say we sent more than we actually did, right? And so there is always kind of this, like, no, this is what we sent. No, we think this is what you sent. And there's always a little bit of discrepancy, too, between what our meters are saying and what theirs are. So it becomes this kind of colorful debate sometimes of what the actual numbers are. So, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that it? All right. Great. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sam.
Charlie.
Hey. Okay, I believe I am next. I'm a menagerie of different items. Is there any specific order? Okay. Okay. Why don't we start with executive, since that is page 1 of the budget. An executive is largely level funded. There are a few things I do want to call out, though. Town meetings, we overspent last year. I think we all know why. We had more town meetings than I think we ever anticipated having. We are moving town meeting this coming year to Colby Sawyer, and hopefully we'll only have one meeting. But we've accounted for that cost within here as well. So town meetings, advertising is level funded, but it's important to note the Intertown Record is now no longer considered or is not recognized as an acceptable place to advertise some things because it is no longer in circulation. You can't get it at a store. It's either online or I think people can still subscribe and get it at their house, but you can't go into a convenience store and pick up a newspaper anymore. So for some of the things that we have to advertise for, it can't be in the we still put it in the Intertown, but that's not recognized as an acceptable source. So that line item has gone up just a little. What did you say? Valley News. Or Concord Monitor. Union Leader. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it for executive. And then the rest are salaries.
2 questions.
Absolutely.
We increased the
We've got that separate.
discretionary account for the select board
Yes.
by 5,000. What's the,
Yes,
the
okay,
thinking
so Selectmen's, sorry, I have that separated out. So we've overspent the Selectmen's discretionary fund in years past. So what I've done is taken a look at what the actuals were previously and just accounted for that. The dispatch study is technically part of the Selectmen's discretionary fund. Any studies that we do come out of Selectmen's discretionary. However, I don't know if it's in the most recent version that you all have. It should be. We pulled out the dispatch study and put it into its own line item outside of the Selectmen's discretionary so that it's very clear. We did that with the wage study a few years ago as well, where we pulled that out into its own line item. So it's still part of Selectmen's discretionary, however, we've just pulled it out so visually we can see where that is. Does that answer your question, Charlie?
it does. I just wanted clarification on what the projection of 30,000 for a dispatch study, help us understand the basis and.
Yeah, so we've had a few conversations loosely. We've committed to launching the RFP process for the dispatch study in the new year, but we have had some general conversations with companies, vendors that do this work, and we are looking probably at around $40,000 for the study. I think 30,000 is what we had hoped it would be at, but what we're hearing is that it's likely going to be 40, but we'll get a better estimate once we have the RFP fully baked out. And
Can you help us with the thinking behind the town not managing an RFP, for example, putting it out to various dispatch centers to see what their pricing would look like and service profile would look like, which wouldn't cost us a consultant to have to do the analysis?
well, I think that the outsourcing altogether is one piece of the puzzle. I think there are many different topics that are rolled up into the dispatch study. It is, yes, of course, what would it cost to go elsewhere, but it's also, are we, for the towns that we are providing dispatch servicing for, is what we are charging enough? Could we be charging more? Should we be charging little or less than what we are currently charging? And then really looking at the operational pieces as well as if we are to keep just dispatch here, operationally, are there improvements that we could make? Are there things that we're doing well that we should continue, but looking at that as well as just, not just the outsourcing piece of what that would look like?
Okay.
Outsourcing is definitely a piece of it, but it's not the full pie.
That's all I had on that.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Okay. All right. That is executive and selectmen's discretionary. The other piece, in the selectmen's discretionary is also our staff holiday party, which we have next week. And then we have put in a little bit of room in the event the dispatch study does cost more, or if there are any other potential studies that pop up that we need to do. We've got hopefully a little bit of room in there. Okay, that is executive. Let me see what's next on here that. The assessment of properties. So assessing, this is all salaries, the majority of this is salaries. The thing to note about the assessing is we don't pay the salary for our assessor. We are part of the Tri-Town Board, so it's Newbury, Sunapee, New London. The salaries actually comes out of Newbury's budget. We have two. We have Chris McAllister, who is our chief assessor, and then John Waldy, who we just hired to replace the gentleman that left last fall. That position has been left unfilled for almost a year now, so we just hired him, and he started a few weeks ago. It is incredibly hard to find assessors in this state. I was down at the New Hampshire Municipal Association's annual conference a few weeks ago and attended a session on assessing. And this was the primary topic of we are in such dire need of assessors that they are in discussions on how do they fix this, because they're not even able to outsource to, I think a lot of towns were outsourcing to companies. Those companies now are having a hard time hiring people for assessing. It's a dying profession, and so they're trying to figure out what to do. So we're watching that closely. I think we are very lucky to have Chris and John. Chris is an absolute expert on Lake Sunapee, and we are very lucky to have her. Things to note, we pay based on the number of parcels. So Sunapee has the most parcels of any town, so they pay the highest, and then New London, and then Newbury, and that's in terms of the staff salary of how that breaks out. And then we do have to pay a yearly expense to update tax maps, and that historically has gone up by 3% every year, and they did confirm that it's going up 3% this next year as well. So that's assessing. Any questions there? Okay. Legal. Okay, legal fees. We have quite a big increase here. I think it's no surprise to anyone. Kim was a lawyer by trade. I am not a lawyer by trade. And so we've increased that. We also have just a number of issues going on in town. We're right now in the middle of trial preparation for a trial we're going to go through in early January, and a few other things that have popped up. When we can, we utilize New Hampshire Municipal's free legal inquiries, which they have been incredibly helpful to me and to the other folks here in getting some help, but we do need to increase that line item. What else? I think that's it for legal fees. And then there's a line, the animal rescue fees, which is $500. $500? Mm-hmm. Yes. What is the change this year in the animal rescue?
So none of the local rescues will take animals, like if we find dogs and we can't find their homes. they won't take them, so we have to take them down. I think it's down in Concord, and we will be charged if we have to do that, so we have that line item. We have been incredibly lucky that Will is so diligent in getting all the tags on the dogs, so that when the police find a dog, they have the tag, they call Will, they get a phone number, they call the owner. So we haven't had to utilize it yet, but you never know.
We have to have it in there, just in case. Okay, so that is legal fees. Yeah, do you want to? Sure. So we can, Lynn's going to jump in on personnel.
So, yeah, the personnel, health and dental, life and disability, FICA, New Hampshire retirement are all the library, and there's an offsetting revenue line items to offset that. Leave time buyout is if somebody leaves, that is now zero because we opened a capital reserve fund for that. And then someone left, so we use that up. But the hope is that if we start to fund it in capital reserve, we will have that on hand as people leave. And then health insurance deductibles is if we have an accident or something, and I have to pay for that, the deductible to cover a car accident. And then employee tuition. Oh, I'm sorry, health insurance deductibles, my bad. That is a program that we have with the employees that if they, for their first $1,000, we reimburse that deductible. It's $1,000 per policy, not per covered. So if I have 2 people, it'll cover one of my deductibles. And employees do take advantage of that. It's a nice little feature for them. And then employee tuition reimbursement. We haven't had people partake in that as of yet, but somebody has just started a class, they got selectman approval, and she will be getting reimbursed for tuition, one of our dispatchers. So that's that.
General question, library question.
Yeah.
The most recent budget comparison sheet that we have is dated November 1st, 2025, that does the comparisons of the 2026 to the proposed 2027, the orange sheet.
What's the question?
I've got to get to the question.
Oh.
It says that there's 1.5% COLA, and the outstanding issue with the library was they had put a 2.5% COLA in, waiting for the select board to make a determination, which was coming from some additional data point.
Yes.
What's the resolution of that, and what is reflected in here?
I don't know that they haven't made a change.
No, so two-part question. For the COLA that the select board is waiting on, the November New England CPI data will be released on December 18th. We plan to speak about COLA at the December 18th Board of Selectmen meeting, and we'll have a recommendation to them. It is looking like, in general, 3% is an average that most towns in New Hampshire are going with. I am part of a town administrator, town manager listserv, and this question was actually asked at the beginning of last week, and almost 30 other towns responded on what they are offering for COLA. So I've captured all that data in a spreadsheet. And several other towns are also waiting for the New England CPI to come out on the 18th as well. But it is looking like around 3% is the average that other towns are going for, and what we can expect to see from the CPI. However, the library historically has tried to stay lockstep with the town, and it's up until this year been easy to do so. I think they're waiting to see what the Board of Selectmen decide for COLA and whether or not they bring it down or if they keep it the way it is for the library employees, but that is at their discretion, not ours, for the library employees.
Right. The present budget that we have has 1.5% for COLA in it.
Yes.
So what we could be looking at is an additional 1.5%. And in aggregate dollars, do we have any sense on what that is?
62,000?
And change? Yeah, 62.
Okay. All right. All to be determined shortly, but that looks like what's possibly going to happen. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I also have We'll save health and welfare for after, but I've also got patriotic purposes, which is level funded. That is how we supply the mini flags that we put out on the holidays. 4th of July, I think there's another one that we do, or do we just do the mini flags?
It's handled by the VFW, so they get the money, they take care of the flag.
Patriotic purposes, archives is level funded. Care of trees we have on here, which is level funded, and Dave Kay is the warden for the trees. I don't know, Dave Carey? Oh, Dave Carey. I don't know if you have any questions on that. If there are, Sam would probably be the right person to answer them. And then I think everything else other than health and welfare we've covered
Yes,
for administration.
yes,
Okay? I'll see you back here for health and welfare shortly.
okay.
Will, is Will up?
Well,
Oh, sorry, it was Lynn, but. Yeah.
oh, Lynn or Will, Lynn.
Okay, I'll go next. So my bucket is finance, and I mean, the question that is always asked and the numbers that really pop out are the ones for the computers. We pay for software, we don't pay for the hardware as much anymore, so that number continues to climb. Computer support and computer licenses. And some of them are split out into departments. You'll see that number split out between departments, but the bulk of it is handled by finance. Same thing with postage. Postage is handled by finance. And I actually brought that line item down because we just haven't been hitting those numbers at this point. So unless the post office decides to really jump their costs up, we should be good there. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Questions for finance? Or finance?
Your turn.
None.
Hi, Will Kidder, town clerk, tax collector, some other things. The flags for 4th of July are actually Better Homes and Gardens. I would be remiss if I didn't say that.
Even up here at the statues?
Everywhere, like the ones on the side of the road are.
So what is patriotic purposes then?
It's when Bob McMichael used to have an event out front here at the statue, and nobody has picked it up ever since he did it. We're hopeful that somebody will, but nobody has.
Oh, okay.
They asked for money last year. VFW.
Huh. We should follow
So, anyway, back to what we were here to talk about. I don't know, I mean, it's getting late, you all can read. Do you want me just to jump to the do you have any questions part, or do you want me to go through my hour presentation? And I'm joking about the hour.
No, I think the only comment I'm interested in, I've heard it before, but the new members may also appreciate is this isn't town clerk, but this is in elections, around the increase in the expenditures we're going to make, particularly around voting booths and equipment and
Yeah, that's the
like-
big one in elections, and it's part of what started as a 3-year plan, and then the state got involved and it became a 4-year plan because they threw us a curveball. So I didn't learn anything at my conference that's going to cost us more money. And in fact, in a rarity, I learned that they're actually going to pay for something out of this year's budget that I thought they weren't, which is pretty amazing when it comes to the state. It's, a good thing. So they're going to actually pick up some expenses this year that we thought they weren't. What's for next year is replacing the ballot booths that we actually stand and vote in. Those are really old. They're getting really rickety. We're not far away from having an issue, and it's something that by statute we need to have. So if they were to go down, we would need to fix and replace what we have, or we couldn't have voting. So again, sort of like Sam was saying, we're trying to be proactive in that. So quite honestly, Charlie, you don't get a panic call from Michael some election like we have to rebuild all these things now. So that's what we're trying to
Garage
avoid with
project.
that. And then, after that, that sort of concludes the 4 years. It was sort of $10,000 a year, more or less, to get us up. And in that 4 years, we've pretty drastically changed a lot of the underlying things about how New London votes and the mechanics of it and that sort of stuff. And like Michael was pretty instrumental in getting a law passed down in Concord this year that we're going to be able to check people into town meeting with the poll pads and that sort of stuff. And I've also gotten myself involved in yet another thing because my inability to say no to anybody. I'm going to be on the executive committee of town clerks for New Hampshire, which will put us in a better place. So we get monthly meetings with DMV and elections and vital statistics and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a good relationship builder for myself and New London. So I think we'll see some benefit from that. And that has to do, and then the other thing that's up that I guess I should talk about a little bit is the certification training that I've been putting off that I really, well, being on the executive committee, I'm getting eyeballs rolled at me to do it. So I should, and it's a great program, and I should. It's just that I haven't had enough time in my world, and I think now with Aaron, who is working out amazingly well so far, I'm going to have more time to do some of that kind of stuff and get the stuff, and the more knowledge we can bring back here, the better. And none of what I do is revolutionary, and a lot of it goes back to ancient Rome and taxes and that sort of stuff, so it's not cutting edge technology per se, but it's a pretty necessary part, and my expense to revenue is pretty good.
For any other questions for Will? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
very much.
Okay, I'm back. Health and welfare, health administration, which let me ground you on what page we're at here. 15? Maybe? Page 15, maybe. Yes. The bottom of 15. Yes. Okay. Health and welfare. So you heard from the health agencies, Lake Sunapee Region Visiting Nurses Association, CASA, COA, and New London Hospital Ambulance, so I won't cover those. Those were covered in the last meeting. Right at the bottom of the page, health and welfare, welfare administration. Sorry, if I go up a little bit more, health administration halfway down the page. That is our health officer, Nick Bear, his salary. It also includes lake testing. No shocker, we had quite a few instances this summer where we had to test our lakes. We were still under budget there, which is great. We hope that will continue. Not that we'll have more testing, but that we will continue to be under budget. Any questions on health administration before I... Okay. Welfare. Welfare is an interesting one. For those of you that aren't aware, we have to help pretty much anyone who comes to us, regardless of whether they are a resident in this town or not. The one anomaly is if someone owns a home in another town and they come to us for mortgage support, we would send them back to their town, but otherwise, we have to help anyone. And so we've been navigating some interesting waters there, but we can't turn anyone away, which means that our budget has the potential to be wildly expensive. Right now, we are trending where we likely, for this fiscal year, we likely will surpass our budgeted amount. We have seen a pretty substantial increase in requests. It is all for housing. It is not food related, rental support. So we'll see how that pans out, but we are trending at exceeding our current budget for this fiscal year. It was approved in the last budget cycle for last year, so for this fiscal year, that we would move from a stipend position to a part-time employee. We would just convert, there's a potential that we would just convert our current stipend employee to a part-time employee, so we're working through that. And that will allow her to set her own set hours, be in the office more, and really do some good work on setting up some services so that when folks come in, there's pamphlets or whatever it is, a guide to better support people instead of it being really ad hoc. And then obviously we've got the welfare payments that we make. And again, that's really where we're seeing things exceed our budget. And we don't really have much control over what we can do there. We did identify that some of our houses of worship here in town, and I do not believe there was any malice behind this, but they had parishioners approach them, and they would say, "Why don't you go see the welfare officer here in New London," not realizing that those parishioners are not New London residents. And we can't turn them away. So we've taken on a number of individuals who are not residents here in supporting them because we're not able to turn them away. So navigating that, I did talk to those houses of worship here in New London, and they were unaware, and they are now aware, and just ask that they make sure that they try to get some information on what town they actually reside in and direct them back to their town's welfare officer. So it's not all falling on us. That might be it for health and welfare.
I have one question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of related to the unanticipated expenditures. We got ourselves in a pickle this past year of having to freeze spending at a certain point because we were concerned about our ability to fund everything. This is one of these line item creeps that could well go beyond, and there may be some other items in the budget that could do that, AKA you've got
Yeah.
a $10,000 consultant cost overage of the 30, and then so you quickly add this all up, and I guess which is sort of a general question, how do we think about that, and or do we budget for that in any way?
I did pad welfare a bit.
So when we got
Yes. Sorry, so this year's budget is $40,000. We will absolutely exceed $40,000, but what I've budgeted for is $60,000 for
Right.
the next budget year.
So what if it goes over 60? I guess, Lynn, this is a question sort of directed towards you to sort of, how do we think about the unexpected? And typically, has the fund balance been the basis to sort of support how we get through it? Or how do we avoid not getting into the pinch we got into this last year?
Well, you can't use the fund balance for anything unless it's gone to town meeting.
Right.
Other than buying down taxes. So yeah, if you don't have much wiggle room in your budget, if you really streamline and sharpen your pencils too much, you don't have that wiggle room. So you have to take from some other line item. You have to not spend other line items. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
But what are those other line items?
Well, and that gets us to the way of thinking about how tightly do you want, to
Right.
budget. But rather than inflating a budget, my bias would be you have a contingency fund for unexpected.
Well, that would be a capital reserve if you choose to open a capital reserve for,
If it's a capital expense, but if welfare's not a capital expense, so I couldn't use a capital reserve to do that.
leave time buyout isn't a capital expense either. You're not purchasing capital. I mean, you can open them for any reason. You just have to follow, what our policy is, but you can certainly
So what
do
makes
that.
you feel comfortable that we're not going to be in the pinch we were in this last year, having to freeze spending?
Part of it, and I've said it before, is that I think Sam is really doing a good job of making sure we are not going over massively on buildings. That was a big part of our problem last time, is that buildings, we spent a lot in repairs and maintenance, and I think Sam, for the budget of 2026, and now going into 2027, he much more thoughtful process of making sure we have what we need. He's also making sure that if there's a repair that's needed, but it's being addressed by his asset management, we're not just going to jump in and throw some money at it. We're going to make sure we do the correct repair. So I'm hopeful that that part of it is not going to exist in this budget, the 2026 budget. Am I wrong?
No, that's 100% correct. And then I think the other thing is, like, this year, for basically all of Public Works, we decided not to do any scheduled paving of roads until the very end of the budget. So that leaves us this $235,000 pool of money to pull from to cover all these other expenditures that we hadn't budgeted for, like the rental of these trailers throughout this whole process. Because otherwise, if I'd done my paving like I normally would have this fall, we would have, that would have spent up that $235,000, and then where would we have come up with the rental of those trailers, the work for the RFP for Public Works, and all these other things. So we are trying to handle that a little bit better in the 2026 budget with that pool, because we don't really have anywhere else that's a big enough line that can kind of cover things without eating up a lot of services that the town provides. And paving's kind of easy to catch back up on. And the other thing is the town has the, what is that one that comes from the $5 from registration?
Oh, the municipal transportation fund that we
Yeah.
can always dip into for paving if we use
If we use up a substantial, so then we
in
can
the
make up.
operating budget.
Yep, hopefully we can make up the difference that we lost in the operating budget, as long as we don't earmark that for other things. But I think we've all kind of agreed that the paving would be the priority to make up for. So that's kind of what we're doing for the 2026 budget, to be as proactive as we can, so.
But Charlie, if we want to think about something like the Selectmen's discretionary fund and maybe expanding the usage of that line item to include sort of this, any sort of overages that might happen collectively, I think we could look at that as well, with your guidance, of course.
Just back to the question of potential overspending.
Yeah.
Particularly this dispatch study that is going to be done. So it seems like there's such a tremendous interest in the town in having this done, and there's a lot of very smart people that might be able to assist with this. So the plan to spend such a large amount of money on consultancy for that, like, why does that have to be the path to come up with this?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting
information?
question. So 11 years ago, we did a dispatch study. We did the first one, which was done, what I'll call in-house by residents and townspeople. That came out, and overwhelmingly, the response was, professionals didn't do this, redo it, and you need to get consultants.
The response
And
from
the community,
the community wasn't happy with that?
yeah.
Okay.
That they didn't feel that that data was accurate, truthful, or was done by professionals, that it was done, or experts, that it was done by a group of citizens. And so that's when, so we did two in 2014. One that was done in-house, and then one that we outsourced to consultants. Just given the landscape with this, I would be really, really hesitant to ask citizens to do it, because I think there are a lot of people with personal agendas that are very interested in doing it. But I'm not sure that that's going to get us any true, meaningful data that isn't skewed in some way or perceived as skewed. And so our preference, the town and the Board of Selectmen, is that we have professionals handle it who know this work inside and out and can help guide us.
And the Board of Selectmen and you will oversee the scope of
Yes.
what's necessary?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Sure. John, did you have a question? No, okay. Okay. All right.
Ready to roll.
thought maybe I just got out easy when we skipped over me, that was the easiest budget presentation in my 8 years. That's okay. No worries. And it still will be pretty easy since my budget is probably the smallest of the department budgets. But as you can see, broken up into 3 sections for planning and zoning, the planning and zoning administrator, and then the planning board and the zoning board.
Yes, and then what he is actually looking at is also in that, but.
Yeah, if you want to look on the budget years, page 6,
Page 5,
and then it's page,
6,
oh, mine's page 6, but I only took a subset, so.
page 5.
The other side's page 5. So the budget support, my salary cost, and my benefits, my administrative assistant, Vicky, her position is housed within the overall administrative budgets because I share her with the assessing department. She's about 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 with me, 1/3 with assessing. And then the 2 other budgets are to support the actual operations of the planning board and the zoning board. Very little change in controllable line items this year, but one sort of interesting change, and it's a couple $100, but is in the secretary portions in both the planning board and the zoning board. We have been able to utilize AI much more substantially with our recording secretary. About a year ago now, we got a different recording secretary, and she and I had long conversations about how we can utilize it. Land use boards are a little bit different in how we have to take our minutes where our decisions are appealable, and so they oftentimes can end up in court, and so we have to capture our minutes a little bit differently than some committees, which can be much more broad. We can be broad in our discussion, but there are really specific conditions or finding of facts or things that have to be in there in a very specific format. So we can't really go just yet to a complete AI system. It's still important for us to have a human in the room, whether she takes notes in real time or whether she's recording and just sort of using keywords in different AI systems to help her generate notes, or what most of the time happens is she just sort of does her minutes as she goes and then uses AI on the back end of it to really reduce the time for review and getting everything formatted properly. So with all of that, we've actually seen, even though we had more meetings last year, we saw a very slight reduction. A couple $100 we adjusted sort of accordingly. But on the zoning board side of things, it's interesting. The zoning board only meets when they had applications. And for a couple of years, we were very light on applications. Contractors, my theory anyway, is that contractors were so busy, they really were not taking the difficult projects. And so zoning board applications seeking variances almost dried up for 2 to 3 years. Last year, we met almost continuously for the better part of 8 months, and we were still able to see a small reduction in the minutes. So while my budgets are small, it's not a big blip on the overall town budget. It is an interesting data point that I think we will see being able to utilize it as time goes. Hopefully, and Lynn and I sort of played around on the CIP side of things this year. Obviously, our new software that we are only in the 2nd year with CIP doesn't have an integrated AI system at this point. We're still learning the very much manual human side of things, but we did sort of play with the output at the end and how can we then put that into some AI system to generate capital planning. So I do see it becoming a much larger part in years ahead. But other than that, that's probably the most exciting part of my budget in terms of change. We did have, I think, $26 increase in our reference materials for the 23 books we buy. We're required to provide them by law, but happy to take any questions.
One. Unless, I don't mean to preempt the committee. Engineering reviews, we budgeted 4,000. Doesn't seem like we've expended that in many years. Why continue to have it?
So we have to have the ability to offer a third-party review to the planning board if they get a case in front of them where they want to seek an outside review, which we have. We haven't had a super technical application in a few years. It is almost always offset by revenue because we can charge the applicant for that. However, the applicant cannot actually pay the engineer. We have to create the loyalty, we are the customer, not the applicant, that they're working for the town of New London, so we have to accommodate that. I can tell you that having worked in some other engineering focuses recently on different projects, and obviously with everything at Public Works that we've been working on, $4,000 is not going to go far. If the second we bring an engineer into it, we are probably in the $10,000 ballpark. But that being said, if it gets overspent, it's simply that the revenue side is overgenerated.
Yeah. Super. That's all I had. Any other questions for Adam? Good set? Thank you. So I think that concludes our budget review items for this evening. I'd like to move the committee to talk about schedule, status of our review, and our outcomes. And Ashley, this also relates to the schedule that we have before us and some of the back-end needs for publication. And I will try to articulate the past process of the committee doing its work in determining the budget that it approves and ultimately presents. And that historically in the past has been equal to the select board budget. That is not always going to be the case, I don't believe. It may. However, the past practice was, and anybody that was here, I don't think anybody was here, Lynn can certainly speak to it and welcome your input. The committee would, in its deliberative process, would review prepare by reviewing the budget, and then we would go through this process, and it would be, I'll just use an example. We would say, okay, anybody want to make a motion to approve the recreation budget? A committee member would say, I make the motion to approve the recreation budget. Get a second. Any conversation? No. Okay, let's vote. And it was sort of, that was it. So it was yes, everybody agreed, or everybody didn't agree, and generally speaking, every budget line item passed. I'm not saying that's good or it's bad, but that was the process. There was little, I would say, no discussion in the committee itself relative to any issue, any item that might have been on a member's mind or in their thought process. So it was sort of a rote exercise, I would characterize it as, and I'm proposing we do it differently. My proposal to us is that the members of the committee step back individually and do their review of this budget. And if you have a motion of a particular nature within a particular department, identify what your motion is in advance of the meeting that we will come to have approval or disapproval of that particular department budget or that particular line item. My intention is, if there are items, I would like to tease those out in advance. Why? Because then we would spend our time there versus going through what was the previous rote process. That change may not produce anything different, but it might. So if you look at this and you say, I think, I'm straw manning this with you as I say it. The CIP has an allocation of $200,000 for X in the capital reserve portion. And you've looked at it and you've studied and you've listened to the debate about it. you think that item should be 400,000, you'd make a motion to say, I think that line item should be increased by 200,000 to a total of 400,000. And this committee would then react to that, say, agree or disagree. But in a case of that nature, I would hope there would be a sufficient rationale provided by that member of the committee to say why they see a $200,000 increase in that particular line item, and for discussion for complete understanding before a vote is arrived at to occur. Conversely, you could say, I see a $200,000 reduction in an item that you individually have looked at based on your assessment of the budget. Make a motion, provide the rationale, and from something that's material would certainly warrant discussion and debate by the committee. I think that's just a much more laser-focused process. It's more robust, and it brings out, after we've done an incredible amount of review and taken time with department heads to understand the budgets, and the select board's done the same, that we are providing our energy and focus on anything that's really material. There may or may not be things that are viewed by an individual as material or not, and that's fine. But I think that, personally, I think that would improve and enrich our process. And I'd welcome your feedback and thoughts, questions, ideas.
I think it's a fantastic idea, because I think it's really important we have time to explore and discuss items in a priority fashion. As Charlie, my experience was last year, it was my first time, and there were certain items that were of great interest and needed a lot of exploration and discussion to fully vet. And there were other items that could be quickly moved on. So it's important, I think, to have the time available to prioritize those discussions so that they can be fully explored and aired. And so I think it would be healthy for us to know ahead of time what other committee members have identified along those lines, so that other members can do their own, can prepare themselves for the discussion ahead of time. So I think it's a very efficient approach, and as you say, teases out those particular items ahead of time.
I agree with that, and I think it'll help us with planning for timelines, right? If we have 5 budgets that we really want to focus on, we might need that in one night. But if we come back and there's a number of things we want to get into, we don't want to get in a spot where we feel like we have to rush because it's 9 o'clock and we have to get the budget approved for town meeting. So I think having those ahead of time will help all of us review in advance. So I like it.
Kind of a point of clarification. So a budget is both a singular document that is made up of a lot of different data points. And the reason I bring that up is it's sort of my approach to how we would handle this. If I were to be given everyone's thoughts prior to us talking about it, that's one thing. I'm actually I'm intrigued by that. If we're going to be taking people's thoughts on individual line items meeting by meeting by meeting, and then with the chance of the odds of us making a big mistake that have a big impact on the back end of this are much higher in that case. So I want to know. So what I'm trying to ask here is I need to know what people are thinking before we go into the meeting, which I know that, and by that I mean in totality, not in connection with the single meeting. So if we were to have everybody's thoughts on the entire budget, that's one thing. If I'm going to be getting a different set on every meeting, every week, that's a whole different thing.
No, agree, and to clarify, what I see is individually, as committee members, we look at the whole budget. And if we are going to make a motion based on our evaluation of that budget, that's what I'll call material. That motion gets shared in advance of the meeting, which we have scheduled for,
The big meeting, the one meeting, yeah.
yeah, which, yes,
You see what I'm saying?
yes. So all those items would be known in advance of that meeting, and that would be the focus of the meeting, rather than the line item budget for.
In that event, I would be in favor of it.
Okay. I also, I think that it might be prudent if, and Ashley, I'd look to you to
Yep.
react, is if that is done, then a department head could be available during that discussion to make sure their viewpoint and their interest and their thinking and their logic is represented and part of the discussion to help inform ultimately a decision that the committee would then be making.
Yep. I think a few things. I'm just looking at the calendar here on NHMA. Friday, February 13th is the last day that we can hold the public hearing for the budget.
Right.
There can be supplemental ones after that, but that is the last day to have at least one. And then the other thing, just to keep in mind, as you're collecting or thinking through the collection of the thoughts from the budget committee members, I think, Charlie, you can send out an email and BCC everyone and ask them to email you directly, but you can't get into group emails where you're all responding, because that becomes a meeting.
Okay.
And it's not a public meeting.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Understood. And so I'm looking at our schedule as it presently sits, that we've got January 21st and January 28th earmarked for the committee's proposed budget, and then a budget that's finalized if there indeed is a reconciliation needed with the select board budget. So my thought is to have committee members between now and the 21st identify what, if
Of
any.
January?
January, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
What, if any, motions they would like to offer along with the rationale for the motion, and that those are then compiled and distributed so the committee as a whole, administration as a whole has, and department heads have that information. And then we come to the meeting on the 21st, if we're still on our schedule at that time, ready to talk through, discuss, deliberate those motions.
And so that meeting on the 21st would be the meeting where the department heads would be here?
Yes.
Okay.
If, and I would say, and only if there was a motion that related to their budget.
But they
I mean,
should plan
that-
on being here?
Yeah,
if-
I would,
Okay.
and I think timing-wise that could work. I mean, we have still revenues, capital reserves, debt obligations, CIP, and what we termed financial forecast models that Lynn's been working on and we haven't really talked about yet. What does that look like? But, there's a lot on the plate for the 17th and the 7th still. But I think between now and then, because we don't have a meeting next week, the next meeting we have is December 17th, and then the next meeting from that is January 7th. There's a lot of time committee members would have to be able to do your assessment of the budget and represent any particular motion you might have. So we could then meet the timeline on the 21st. And anecdotally, just looking at what the select board went through this past year, it took them more than one meeting to get to their budget for a variety of reasons, which we may also face. And we would have the wiggle time of January 28th to final.
Yep.
And if there was a delta, then there's some reconciliation process that would need to be taken
And still give us that wiggle room,
and
too.
would give us time, I think, on the back end of that to meet the timelines that you've listed here for public hearing notification. Would, if we review the budget that way, looking at motions, and then ultimately you're voting on the whole budget department by department, would we use those as public sessions of budget review versus we have a separate meeting with the budget as a whole?
Well, the meetings regardless are public.
Right.
But whether or
But
not
they're-
they can be utilized
Ad-
as the public hearing, I don't think it can. Final budget.
It's got to be the final. So
Yeah.
If the date of the 28th is we have finalized, then potentially the date of the 4th of February as the public hearing
Sure.
suffice and still meet the deadlines that you've outlined, including
Yes,
the
as long as
printing.
that's the final.
Right. would happen.
If that matches the select boards, because if you don't match the select boards, you guys have a reconciliation.
Right.
And then you also have to notice the meeting on if you're going to have it on the 4th, you have to notice
Is
it
it-
7 days in
days.
advance. So that's back to the 28th.
Yep.
If you're not done, you'd have to just reschedule that, but
We're going to know.
it's tight.
Yeah, it's tight, but that wouldn't hold up an issue with publication of annual report and is that?
No, we have the dates for the town report, we have backed into the dates that we are statutorily required to across all fronts.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Charlie, just a question. Would you then be setting a deadline for budget committee
Oh,
members?
hold on.
Yes.
I got one thing about the
Sorry,
email
yeah.
and all of that. I think it's a really bad idea to have those discussions via email. I think that should be figuring out what the motions are and that sort of stuff.
That's all I'm talking about.
Right, I don't think
Not
that
having
should.
a discussion. We're not having a discussion over email.
Right, but you're saying what your motions are and the rationale behind them. I think that should happen in a public meeting. I don't think that should happen via email, because I promise you those emails will get right to know requested.
Well, I think though Charlie is just collecting and then they are going, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that he is just being the collector and that they're going to be discussed at one of the budget committee
Yes.
meetings.
So everything that's in those emails is going to happen in the next meeting. So you'll
Ye-
all stay what your rationale was for it, and
Yes.
everything that's in those meetings would have.
Yes.
You
It's-
would just
it's
know in
essen-
advance.
Yes,
Okay.
it would be data preparation.
Okay.
Another way of sort of adding on to what Will is saying is perhaps if we're saying that we want to utilize the email method, it would be prudent on our behalf to anticipate that there would be a right to know claim against them. And so we would simply enter them into the public record at the beginning of it anyway.
Or at very
And so
least,
they're
I would
just
write your
part of it.
emails
Like, just
realizing that that's likely to
Realizing that
happen.
that email is going to happen and it's just part of the record. And it'll, believe me, it'll save everybody a lot of time and headache in the long run, just to go ahead and make them public.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Then you're suggesting that would be, because typically we'd post the meeting materials related to, you go on the website.
Yeah, I would see
you
that being a right place for
meeting
that to be.
materials,
Oh, yeah.
and so this would be
Yeah.
be
Sort
included
of-
with that. Yeah, meeting
Yeah,
materials.
I like that.
Yeah, and then you don't have to rehash every single little thing you said in the email at the meeting, too.
Right.
So that helps
Right.
to do it that way.
Made public upfront, in advance of the meeting.
More public is more better.
Yeah, no, exactly. So the meeting is completely, fully disclosed, fully transparent, upfront.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Will.
Sorry, Cynthia.
No, that's okay. My simple question is, are we then setting a deadline that budget committee members can bring up issues? If a motion isn't presented by a certain date, like you can't bring up something new at the meeting? Is
You
that
could
the
bring
idea?
something new up at the meeting because you've now come to some new understand.
No, I know, within
But-
that topic, yes, but can you have new like, are you trying to?
You could. What the intention is to tease out what the motions are in advance and to focus the discussion and deliberation around those versus the prior process. This can
Right, so that's what I mean. So that means that that meeting would be focused on those motions. But the intent is to sort of have that out in front and not be introducing more new things in those meetings. It's kind of like a way for us to,
be more efficient and more deliberate and more direct around the major issues. However, new data could have come up, new thought could have come up, and you might sit as an individual and say, whoa, I really want to make this motion, but it's outside of the parameters we're establishing here. That absolutely could
a
happen,
new motion in that moment. Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So if I understand it correctly, what we're trying to get a handle on is what is the known by committee members that they would like to address in terms of a motion, and not to preclude other things coming up more as things progress,
Yes.
right?
And I, well, candor, I think it makes us better at doing our job versus my experience was prior, I mean, I spent a lot of time nitpicking the budget and found out, that really wasn't very productive. And then there were members who didn't look at the budget at all. And I think we want to avoid the last minute kind of review. Well, do we approve 2 eggs or 1 egg? Well, let's go with 2 eggs. I mean, as opposed to some really very good, thoughtful content to a motion, if there are any, so that we can then really have discussion about it to ultimately inform decision. And I think, John, what I heard you also intimating is that contextually, we're thinking about the whole. We're not just thinking about 2 eggs versus 1 egg, but what's the context of a motion? What's a motion's context relative to not only the individual item, but the bigger issues that are more strategic with a budget?
So I have a longer-term question because I'm simply taking humanity into consideration. Is it possible, what are the implications if the Budget Committee were not to have a budget one year?
I think statutorily, we are obligated to have a budget.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because but historically, it's.
Oh, no, I understand absolutely everything you're saying. My statement is taking human nature into effect, which is eventually this would be a very disruptive process. I'm not saying that it would be this year, but you're looking at years and years and years and years and years of decorum that has presented budgets. And I get that there's an effort to try and control expenditures, and there's a huge desire for that to happen. But this ain't going to be an easy thing to chair in every year. And I say that so that I can look at you and say, I told you so, Charlie. And I'll be quiet after that.
I'm sure, so,
That's all
noted. I do feel strongly that we can be better at what we are elected to do if we are dealing in a more complete and comprehensive deliberation over anything that might be a big issue. That could be
And I understand that too.
cut it
I think you're
or
being
grow it.
You're
Optimism.
optimistic, naive, heroic. I don't know. You fill in the blank.
Maybe it is what it is. All I know is I personally don't want to go through the process we went through the last 2 years that I was a participant in. I just didn't see it as productive.
Yeah, that's
You know, so that was, and maybe we'll find out that this first go at something like this is not, and we'll change it again, but that's the thought process that I'm sort of laying out to us.
And just, could I add another piece that may be a progression of this approach, change, right? And there's been discussion in the past about extending call it the season where the Budget Committee meets and the frequency in which the Budget Committee meets, so that the opportunity throughout the year to get more informed and deliberate and discuss versus having this fairly tight calendar to go through an awful lot of appropriations and discussions. So I would love to see this kind of lead to a further changes in a process that would allow for more of that. And I think that may smooth some of this out, that would have more time to get more grounded in the budgets versus this time frame that we've been thrusted into year after year. Thank you.
I
Other
just want to add
thoughts?
that I still think budget seasons are tight, and like we have to wait till we have a budget to review. So there's still going to be just that crunch during this time frame too. I mean, I'm all for spreading out our meetings, but I think this is going to be a heavy time. So if there's things we can do to make it more efficient, but
Because I think we could find opportunities that there may be particular areas that require a kind of a deeper dive that of strategic importance, and we could use those intervening months to focus on those, so that would make this piece of it go a little, would be more informed about it during that process. So that may help this part of it as well. So, and there are towns that do. I've looked around and seen what other towns do and how they approach it with their budget committees. And they do have a number of towns, and probably more than, because I just did a spot check, have rather, year-round opportunities where the budget committee meets and addresses and gets updates on spending. They're not a governing body, that's not to be confused, of any operational direction, but it's more like just staying close to the budget, because this is our appropriations, and how it performs over the year is really important for us to stay on top of during the year, as opposed to getting the report card, call it, at the end and then reacting to that. So I just kind of put that out there as maybe a next step after we get through this particular season.
it's like a quarterly review or something. Yeah.
Okay, if we're in agreement, if not, or any additional comments or input or suggestions, we'll take on the task of putting an outline together of what I'm proposing, what the format might look like, a little bit of the why behind it, and then a timeline so that we can meet our current schedule as we have it printed. Okay? Yes, please.
If CIP is still on the agenda for the 17th,
Yes.
Sam's on vacation that week, so obviously it is 90% his projects. So I will do my best as I present it to you to be able to answer the Public Works questions. But if anybody has questions that are so specific to operations in relation to a Public Works CIP, if you could just email them to Sam and I sometime over the next week, we can prep so that I can have those answers for you.
We will do so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you for your time, everyone.